It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, featuring industry outlooks, panel discussions on trending topics, and interviews with business executives, community leaders, and government officials. And now, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studio, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. We are up to episode number 26, and as always, we are coming to you from the Drum Creative Studios in Greenville. It's good to have you here. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins. You know, economists are always looking at a number of factors when they are trying to determine what the economy is going to look like, the financial markets are going to look like as time goes on. They're trying to look around the corner, so to speak. And so they're always looking at a number of things. A few things that they look at that you might not always think of top of mind are things like construction starts, real estate trends, construction trends, and even manufacturing as well. These are the types of bellwether industries that economists can look to try and get a peek, like I say, into the future. It wasn't too long ago that we aired the residential real estate outlook. David Krigler with Berkshire Hathaway joined me for that. And that is on our YouTube channel, and if you get a chance, take a look at that. But today we're turning our attention to the commercial real estate industry. And here to help me have that conversation today is Stephen Smith. Stephen is the managing director for South Carolina for CBRE. Steve, it's good to have you in the studio. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. It's cold out there, man. You walked in, and we're going through a little cold spell here. I feel like I'm up north somewhere, but it's warm in the studio.
It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It could be a lot worse. But before we get into the thick of things, let's talk about you for a second. First of all, where are you from? I think you're a South Carolina boy, aren't you?
Originally from Charleston, South Carolina.
You're from
born
Charleston.
and raised.
Okay, and you're in Greenville now. You live and
yeah, we've been in Greenville since August of 1993.
Geez. Okay. So you've been here a long daggone time.
Yeah, a long time.
You consider yourself a Greenvillian. Get back to Charleston very often?
Oh, a good bit.
Right.
We have an office down there, so I get down there a fairly good bit.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know that there are two better towns anywhere that a state can offer two cities any better
Absolutely.
than Greenville and Charleston.
Absolutely.
In South Carolina. So that's good to hear. Let's talk about CBRE for a second. You know what? I always knew CBRE was really, really big. Until I began thinking about this and knew you were coming on and started doing a little research, I got to be honest, I did not know CBRE was as big as it is, but it is the world's largest commercial real estate office or firm, and huge, right?
Very huge.
Yeah.
Well, it was founded in 1906.
Yep.
Originally from it was Coldwell Banker. Then they, through mergers and all that,
Right.
it became Coldwell Banker, Richard Ellis, and then Europe started getting involved from an acquisition standpoint, and now it's CBRE.
Yeah, and CBRE, and I didn't know this, but you just said it. Coldwell Banker, Richard Ellis, and Richard bought the company at some point years back, and then that's how it became CBRE. Have I got that right?
Yes.
You know, interesting, your trivial piece for the day, folks, but CBRE in 1981 was bought by Sears. That cracks me up. Sears, who is now, of course, on its way out, bought CBRE in 81. They turned around and sold it in 89.
Back then it was CB Commercial.
CB Commercial, okay.
Yes.
All right.
It was really one of the only commercial real estate companies in the country.
How about that?
Yeah.
Tell me, so you, of course, largest in the world, so you are huge in South Carolina as well. But give me an idea where your office is located in South Carolina.
In South Carolina, we have Greenville office, which was where I house.
Right.
And then we have Columbia,
Yep.
the state capital.
Yeah.
And then we have Charleston, obviously, on the coast.
Right.
And, the three offices combined have about 120 people.
Okay. So you're in the three major markets in South Carolina. Let's look back at 2023 for a second. We were talking before we came on the air, and it was a really volatile year. 2023, from a financial market perspective, when you look back on it now, it all turned out pretty good. But during the year itself, we had a whole lot of this going on, right? At least from the financial market perspective. How about the commercial real estate industry? What did that look like in 23?
It was volatile as well.
way.
There was a lot of, banks tightened the purse strings considerably in buildings that you would think would be slam dunks to get financed.
Right.
Yesterday
Yeah.
became very challenged, and one of the things we're going to see this year is it's both a challenge and opportunity for who's buying and who's selling.
Right.
But there's going to be, some lenders taking properties back
Yeah. Yeah.
because the current owners of those buildings can't get them refinanced.
Yeah. Yeah, rates in 23 went up and they went up and then they went up and they went up some more. But
Right.
but here recently they've come down a little bit. We had the Financial Market Outlook presented by Jeff Froman here a week or so ago, and Jeff was telling us while he was in the studio that they're looking at a few cuts that they think will probably happen in 2024. Is that what your analysts tell you?
Yeah, that's what we're kind of betting on, so to speak. I joke with some friends of mine in the business and say it can't get any worse than it was last year.
Right.
But I think we're looking at some cuts in interest rates, which will certainly stimulate activity. The capital markets business, which is basically in our world is financing, investment sales,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Right. Before we get into 2024, let's stick with 23 for a second. In 2023, how did South Carolina look as it compares nationally? I mean, we're same, better, worse, what?
Our numbers actually, and I'm talking employment numbers right now, our numbers came back quicker than nationally they did after the pandemic, as far as labor and employment.
And let's move to 2024. We talked about interest rates, but let's talk about inflation for a second in terms of how that is impacting expense, which in turn, of course, can greatly impact margins in your all's business. Inflation looked really rough there for a while. There was talk of a recession, and then it has turned that corner, at least we hope for good. From your perspective, what does inflation look like?
There were a lot of economists last year that said we're definitely going to have a recession.
Yeah.
They kept saying that, and one never really happened. And then we had the president trying to rewrite the description of what a recession was,
Right.
which was interesting.
Right.
But we feel very positive, from an outcome standpoint for 2024.
That we put that behind us, and that's not going to be a reality. I understand what you're saying. It almost felt like sometimes that they were trying to talk us into one, regardless if it was going to occur or not. So I see where you're coming from that. Another thing that is a challenge and that has caused some problems is regulatory risks. Things like restrictive zoning or tighter building codes, that kind of thing, rent control. How are those types of things impacting business in your industry in South Carolina?
Rent control is not really a topic that we hear a lot about, in the South. It's more prevalent in, the Northeast and, the Midwest and those kind of markets.
Right. What about zoning? As I mentioned, there are areas where some zoning is more restrictive than the others. Do you find that South Carolina is more or less restrictive? I would think somewhere like Charleston, you got a lot more zoning issues, and I'm thinking logically because of historically the type of city it is. Is that true?
It's, coming from Charleston, I was, aware of, the Board of Architectural Review, which is kind of
Yes.
the big daddy in Charleston as far as when you want to get something built or something renovated or something painted, you had to go through this extensive
Right. Extensive process.
Yeah. And a long process.
Yeah. Right.
And an expensive process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that's probably the case, especially in Charleston. Building codes. Compare Greenville and Columbia and Charleston from a building code standpoint.
I think they're all very similar. Again, Charleston has a little bit more stringent guidelines, especially on the peninsula.
Right.
But, from a regulatory standpoint, all the three markets are pretty much, very similar.
Yeah. Columbia, If you're looking at the vibrancy of each of the three markets in the commercial real estate business, I would assume that Columbia is not as vibrant as the others. However, it is where the State House is located, so it has its own things to offer. How do you see that?
Yeah, Columbia's got a lot. A lot of the real estate in Columbia is state-owned, which is presents a tax challenge. For the most part, but there's a lot of good things going on in Columbia. Obviously, Bob Hughes, who's local to Greenville, has a big project going on in Columbia.
Right. Let's talk about REITs, real estate investment trust, and of course are greatly influenced by the economy. And so last year there were a lot of issues with the value of those trusts up and down as the economy fluctuated. I was not overly familiar with REITs before too long ago, but explain to me and explain to the viewers why they are so important to the industry itself.
Well, instead of an investor spending all of their investment dollars into one property, a real estate investment trust affords you the opportunity to buy many properties, thus reducing your risk.
Right.
And we used to have a number of REITs that had properties in more or less in downtown Greenville.
Yeah.
And in downtown Charleston. But again, it's a way to mitigate risk.
Right.
And so they're popular, very popular.
But I'm wondering, if you are an investor and you want to invest in a number of properties, are you able to do that through an REIT by choosing your properties, or are those choices made for you? How does that work?
But you can do both ways. Mm-hmm. You can say, I want my funds allocated to these certain properties or these certain warehouse of properties, and
right.
Or you can just say, I want to buy into this fund, and that fund has 45 different types of multifamily products in it.
Right. And that's the way I would thought it would occur. But you're saying you can go in and say, I really like this, this, and this, and let me put my funds there.
Yeah.
Works that way as well. We're talking about downtowns, and I want to come back to that for a second. The future of downtowns. There has been a lot of talk about, in some cases, downtowns are dying, so to speak, right? As we continue now, again, we live in a state where we have some downtowns that are extremely vibrant, and they, of course, are doing the exact opposite. But by and large, do you find, and let's just take the three major markets out of the equation, do you find that downtowns are beginning to suffer?
I haven't really seen downtowns suffering. Of course, we have downtown Greenville, which is just on fire right now from
right.
Every night of the week. There's, people on the street, and, it's very vibrant. You got downtown Charleston, which has always been very crowded at night. Lots of restaurants, lots of entertainment venues in downtown Charleston, and in downtown Columbia as well. Downtown Columbia has a lot more influence from the University of South Carolina. There's such a big student population in downtown Columbia, which really keeps the doors open from a restaurant standpoint. Those kind of restaurant bars, very active.
But do people want their offices to be in downtown still?
I would say yes. Matter of fact, there's 4 or 5 great sites in downtown Greenville right now as we sit here. And I was on my way over here, I was thinking about those kind of properties as far as opportunities for coming up in the next couple of years.
So Charleston, there's not a lot of space to get into in Charleston anymore. Is that the case still?
There's affordable space. When you say space, what are you referring to?
Well, again, I'm talking about commercial real estate. If I wanted to locate my office in Charleston, I would think I might have a hard time doing that.
No, there's ample opportunity.
Is there?
Especially which a lot of Charlestonians used to refer to as the Auto Mile, which is Lawrence Road is our Auto Mile.
Got it.
Morrison Drive in downtown Charleston is the Auto Mile for Charleston.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we just moved our offices on, it's basically East Bay Street.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunity for office, renting office space in downtown Charleston.
I know this because I have some friends in Charleston, and depending on who you talk to, depends on what you mean or how you define downtown Charleston. When I think of downtown Charleston, I think of the historical district. How do you define it?
Without question, the historic district, but again, it's expanding.
Yeah, right.
All the way down on the neck of the peninsula, and and obviously in the suburban market, there's ample space as well.
Yeah. There are four main sectors, unless I'm forgetting one, in the commercial real estate business, right? There's industrial, there's office, there is multifamily, and retail. So I just kind of want to run through those, and I want you to give me your thoughts on how each of them are doing, and we can talk about it from a South Carolina perspective, or if things are different in each of the markets, then let's discuss that too. And let's start with industrial. Tell me what the industrial side of things looks like.
The industrial business in our business for CBRE, Charleston, Columbia, and Greenville is very, very active. Mm-hmm. Greenville's the biggest of the three.
Yeah.
Greenville's roughly about 250 million square feet of product, which a lot of people don't realize is that there's that much industrial space in the greater Greenville area.
Available space right now?
Not available. That's
occupied space right now.
Occupied and or available.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. There's been a big surge in speculative development in the last 6 to 12 months that has really shot us as far as our supply. There's a fair amount of supply out there that gives some investors a little pause.
Yeah.
When they're looking at potentially building another building. As of probably 3 months ago, we had 9 1 million square foot plus buildings on the market in Greenville area.
Right.
That's a lot of product.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So Greenville, of course, is larger than the other two within that sector, but how about Charleston and Columbia? Where do they fall? Which one's larger?
They're really about the same. They're in the 55 to 60 million square feet each.
Right.
There's a fair amount of activity, and there's still investors out there that are looking for land sites, good land sites, hopefully flat.
Yeah.
From a cost standpoint.
Right.
That are out there, and I'm not talking just your average Joe. I'm talking about real estate investment trusts. People. Rockefeller is the name that's thrown out there. That's has some space up on Highway 290 in Greenville County. Well, it's actually Spartanburg County. So there's a lot of name brand household in the commercial real estate business that are out still chasing sites today. I mean, and there's a demand for it. And there's certainly supply.
Greenville is twice as large in terms of available product as either Charleston or Columbia. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
Let's turn to office space. Office space is, if I had to guess, I would say maybe Columbia has more available, but I'm just guessing.
Columbia and Charleston are, again, similar sizes as far as amount of office space available in the market.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Greenville's probably a little bit bigger, but not by,
okay.
And again, we're talking like 12 to 15 million square feet in each market.
Yeah.
And it's really how you track the markets. We call it every 20,000 square foot building that's not owner occupied. Yeah. That's what we track.
Right.
So there's, and when you look at where business is good right now, you look at downtown Greenville, you look at County Square. Mm-hmm. That project's got a lot of momentum going right now. There's actually one building under construction right now that's about 180,000 square feet. And there's another one set to come online probably in the next 90 to 120 days. So a lot of activity, a lot of interest. It's almost downtown, but it's not.
Yeah.
But it's a great location, great parking, easy in, easy out, kind of, which is desirable for tenants.
So I heard you say that all three markets are approximately the same, but Greenville's still a little bit bigger than the other two.
Yes.
Let's stick with office for a second, and I want to talk about office from the perspective of the pandemic. So March of 2020, COVID hits, right? And at that point, people started working from home as time went on. And, you fast forward more than 3 years later, and almost 4 years now, and people are still working from home to some degree. Sure, a lot of them have come back, but there is still that trend that existed then that is going to exist today. And you know what? I think it's going to stay with us to some degree for a long time. And I'm wondering how that has affected the commercial real estate industry and the office. And let me say this, and then tell me what you think. When I think about it logically, it seems to me like that companies are going to have to downsize their brick and mortar space if they're allowing more and more and more people to work from home. And if that's the case, then how does that get absorbed into the commercial real estate market and what occurs? Am I right about that?
I mean, you're right on target. I mean, essentially what we're seeing in some of the major markets, New York, Chicago, those kind of cities where there's more than enough square footage of office space that's sitting on the market that, once at one period of time, at one point in time, it was, 90 to 100% occupied. And now they're looking at, potentially 60 to 70% occupancy rates.
Right.
And they're looking at converting some of these, towers into residential.
Right.
So we're starting to see a good bit of that. But again, it's in more of the major markets. From a smaller market perspective, like a Greenville, Charleston, Columbia, there's not a lot of that going on, but there's, companies are taking less, doing more with less.
Yeah.
But there's still a need for office space. When I'm training new brokers, I need to see you and look you in the eye.
Yeah.
I can't, be calling you, trying to run you down at home or wherever you might be.
Right.
Then you hear about the water cooler talk. There's no water cooler talk when you're working from home.
Yeah.
And if I'm a young person wanting to get in the business or just got in the business, I want everybody around me.
Right.
I want all the old gray-haired guys to tell me what they did, how they did it, and what made them successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm all for being able to look each other in the eye and have that camaraderie within an office. However, the reality of it, though, is that there are plenty of companies that are, if not allowing people to work from home, at least allowing for a hybrid work schedule. And I do believe that that's going to continue. The demand for larger, is there a way for you to determine right now if there is an equal demand for larger square foot buildings, or has that demand lessened a little bit?
I think demand has lessened a little bit, but if a company has 30,000 square feet in downtown New York City, they might be taking on their next go around. They might be taking 20. They might be taking. In some companies, frankly, might be taking more.
Right.
It just really depends on who the company is, what sector they're in, and if they're doing well, and if they're hiring a lot of people, they might take more space.
Let's talk about retail. Tell me, as I understand it, retail suffered, retail rebounded. Where is retail today?
Retail is very vibrant. There's a lot of activity going on in the marketplace, in South Carolina as a whole. I would say Charleston, because it's so entrenched in the travel business and people staying in hotels and that, the retail is a little bit more active in Charleston than the other two markets. Mm-hmm. But there's still a great amount of activity. Grocery anchored shopping centers, the Publixes of the world, Food Lions, Harris Teeter, all these grocers are out looking for sites, looking to expand their footprint, which is a good thing. That's a sign of a vibrant economy and a growing economy.
Right. I've heard you say vibrant quite often. I've said it a couple times myself, but as we go through this, we continue, that word continues to kind of pop up. You talked about vibrancy within the industrial market and downtowns, and now with retail. Things must be looking pretty good.
Yeah, and rates are increasing, which is always a good sign. And that usually happens when demand is very strong and vacancy rates are low.
Yeah. The last one, multifamily. Talk to me about multifamily.
That's kind of the darling of CBRE right now. As far as product type, the amount of people we have in that business line that sell day to day, it's a very active marketplace right now, and we don't see it slowing down.
What are the types of things that fall into a multifamily category?
Your traditional, they call it garden style complex, where there's 250 units, 3-story, elevator, 2 pools, kind of a clubhouse kind of look. I mean, those are what I would call the typical multifamily products that we're selling and seeing on the market in South Carolina.
Right. Steve, I'm going to get you out of here on this. Let's talk about 2024 and put your look into your crystal ball and tell me what 2024 do you think holds in store for South Carolina and your industry?
Well, I think from a macro standpoint, the election is going to have a bearing on the economy because it's going to slow it down because people do not like uncertainty. And that time from when people start, that election process up until when they know who's the next president will be, or they'll kind of change their thought pattern. Is like, okay, this is who we have.
Yeah.
Now we can go back to work, so to speak.
Right. Politics plays a part in so many things. And so, when we were talking about the financial market outlook, again, with Jeff Froman here recently, we talked about how this was going to be a volatile year again, if for no other reason because of that. And I got to be honest, I wouldn't have thought that the uncertainty of the political climate these days would have impacted commercial real estate, but it does.
It does. And there's, unfortunately, on the negative side of the equation, there's going to be some properties taken back by lenders.
Yeah.
The owner of that office building or shopping center, financed it at one rate, couldn't get refinancing during the last 12 to 18 months. And they're just, and the owner of that property is just going to, basically hand over the keys.
Right.
So that's going to be, some of the challenge for existing, property owners. There will be some cuts in the interest rates, which is a good thing, but it's probably not going to happen as fast as we all want it to. Mm-hmm. But I think overall in 2024, we're going to see good activity. But I think it's going to be more geared towards the third and fourth quarters.
When all is said and done, do you think it'll match 2023?
I think it'll blow by 2023.
Good stuff. Steve, I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome, folks. That is Steve Smith. He is the managing director for South Carolina for CBRE, and we've been talking about the commercial real estate outlook for South Carolina. Appreciate you joining us on another episode of Let's Talk Business. We'll see you next time.